Welcome back to the Commanders Declassified podcast, your home for all things Washington Commanders. We are the Washington Commanders without a head coach. And I don't know why, Eric, we were supposed to be the pretty girl at the dance this coaching cycle, and yet we're one of two teams without a head coach coming up on February 1st, man. What's going on out there?
Because when you're the pretty girl at the dance, you can afford to be picky. That's what's going on. Why rush it? There's are some. Is there any head coach that's been hired so far that you are just like heartbroken that you didn't get? Maybe Harbaugh, but was that really ever going to work here? I was a Raheem Morris guy, and I'm glad he got his gig in Atlanta. I think he's going to be great. But I mean, do you care that we didn't get Dave Canales? Or I don't even know who do these other people hire, right? Like no, I don't. I'm not worried about it. The process is going to work itself out. We'll get a candidate. There's the top names are still out there minus one, and we'll get the top candidate who wants to be here. And I think that's a great thing. I don't think rushing it and hiring the first big name or just settling for somebody because you can't get anybody else and you have to throw a bunch of money at somebody. Like, why? I mean, you finally got a good situation, a good ownership group. People want to come work here for the most part. So just let yourself be patient and make the best choice.
Speaking of patience, Mike, do you think we screwed ourselves by trying to wait for playoff teams to hire a head coach when most of the folks who had openings didn't wait for the playoffs to complete?
I'm gonna answer that by saying what Adam Peters said in his press conference. I was trying to pick a time to throw this quote out, and it just so happened that it's immediately. In the middle of his press conference, somebody asked him a question about this coaching search. How long would it take? Yada, yada, yada. He said, and this is almost word for word, he said, I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but I do know come week one, you're going to fill us. Pause. But yeah, so I'm like, I wanted Ben Johnson just like everybody else. He was the number one coaching candidate. It's not any coincidence that a lot of teams have been wanting him for the last two seasons. But obviously, for whatever reason, he's not ready. But I don't think Washington screwed themselves because a candidate decided he wanted to stay back or decided he wanted to run it back. I just think Washington is going to either go with their number two or kind of start from the scratch or start from beginning because, I mean, like this, it's just a mess right now. Because if you listen to the reports, it's like, do the fans care that Dan Quinn has had an interview 3 times? Of course they do. They don't want him here. A lot of fans want Mike McDonald. So I'm kind of scared. What happens if we don't hire McDonald? What if there's a name out there that we haven't interviewed yet that's going to become head coach? What if they run it back with the enemy? Like, it's a lot of questions we have out there that we need to hurry up and get answered because though I don't think they set themselves up by taking so long, they are in a bit of a pickle right now. But I trust them to work their way out of it because they're confident. Can't say that about the previous ownership group.
Yeah. How are they in a pickle, though? I don't understand. There's so many things I don't understand.
I say the only reason I say we're in a pickle because they were probably expecting to hire Ben Johnson this week, and there were probably some things that were put in motion expecting him to be the head coach. Even though reports say he wasn't the overwhelming favorite, there were a lot more reports that said otherwise, including Peter King that came out, I think it was yesterday, he came out and said that the coaching agents, the coaching circles believed that Ben Johnson would be the head coach. So, like, obviously, the way I see it is like Ben Johnson had a long thought, and he was like, I hate to do this to y'all. I know y'all flying to interview me and Aaron Glenn. I really hate to do this. But I think I'm going to stay in Detroit and run it back one more season. And I could imagine Washington was a bit ticked. But like I said, I trust the ownership group. I trust Adam Peters to rebound quickly. It would not surprise me if we have a new coach by Thursday.
Well,
because they already interviewed multiple coaches. It's just more like, hey,
you're doing follow-up interviews at this point. Yeah, I don't see an issue with it at all. Yeah, I think it's a testament, all those conflicting reports out there. I think it's a testament to the job that this group has done keeping the ship tight, right? Like they don't let stuff slip.
Yeah,
So there's just so much speculation out there. I would agree with you that I've already forgotten his name because I don't care about him, but I would agree with you that he's the top coach available, and he was probably the top choice. But if he doesn't want to be here, he doesn't want to be here, and I think it's a blessing
right.
in disguise. You don't want to get a guy like. I think my personal opinion on what happened with him is that he was probably convinced that he was going to get talked into the job if they got here because they just always get the guys they want. And he was not 100% on board with it and didn't want to be talked into something. So he just nipped it in the bud. That's just my speculation. And then, he waited till they were on the plane to do it. So they'd still have to come interview Aaron Glenn. Maybe, I don't know. But, yeah, I feel like Ben Johnson it's if we didn't get him, we didn't get him. I don't, but if we had gotten him and he didn't really want the job, how great would that have been, right?
Yeah.
So, and I don't understand why people are so like down on Dan Quinn either. I don't get that at all. I mean, he's
we're going to talk about that in a minute. Don't
okay.
go there yet.
I don't. Yeah.
Don't go there yet. Don't go there yet. So if you guys remember when we did our coaching like rankings for like the hiring, my number one was, I believe it was the coordinator Todd Monken from Baltimore. Well, he crapped the bed on Saturday, or Sunday. That's out. Why didn't he run the ball? I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. But anyway, I think Aaron Glenn was my number 2, if I'm not mistaken. I had him ahead of Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson was my number 4 behind Shane Waldron too. There was, I don't know what it was about Ben Johnson, but there was always something about him that didn't let me connect him to Washington in my mind. Not that I had like this prophecy about it or anything like that, but I think it was the report from Josina Anderson about like him wanting $15 million, remember? And his agent came out and said, that's not true. But then today the report came out from Adam Schefter that like teams weren't really willing to meet his financial demands. So he went back to Detroit. And it's kind of like, well, maybe he just got wind of like the fact that Washington wasn't paying $15 million a year for a head coach. And he's like, well, if you're not going to do that, screw you guys. And his agent just let him know when we were on our way. I mean, that can happen too. And he has a right to demand what he wants for salary. And we have a right to say no, that we're not going to do that because it sets a bad precedent within the franchise. We're not going to be paying coaches quarterback money 2 years from now. It's not going to happen. Right. So we still have, to you guys' point, you still have Aaron Glenn. You still have Dan Quinn. You still have Mike McDonald. Now, I don't think a lot of people know a lot about Mike McDonald. I think they heard his name rumored early on, associated with Adam Peters, and like they kind of gotten on board. It's all over Twitter now. Everybody's like, I want Mike McDonald. And I don't know anything about Mike McDonald other than he coached a really good defense in Baltimore this year. But he's very young. And if you were worried about the inexperience with Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick, then you ought to be worried about the inexperience with Mike McDonald as well. That being said, I think like I really want the NFL to change the rules around head coaching gigs to the point where like you can't hire a new coach until the playoffs are done. That's what I want. Like anybody who fires a coach, you got to wait till after the playoffs are done and then go get yourself a new head coach. That's what I want.
No, that's a long time, bro.
Nah,
Like
so
we're still not even in the.
We're just sitting here with torches and pitchforks ready. That's what the problem is. Like, it doesn't matter because again, all the guys we interviewed, we interviewed what, like 8 guys, and like 6 of them, 5 of them are still on the market. So the guys that we targeted are for the most part still around and on the market. So again, I don't care that we missed out on Gerard Mayo as a head coach. Not that he would have come here anyway, right? Like. Or
it's 50%. It's 50%. I don't. Slowick, those guys. But anyway, go ahead.
Slowick. I mean, he's going back to Houston anyway. It's like he doesn't. He clearly wasn't going to get the job here. He wasn't ready for it. So again, the guys that we've targeted for the most part are still around. So I don't care. Again, be patient. It's just so weird because we're in that Dan Snyder mindset where you have to get things done quickly.
Right.
Yes. We're not there.
Well, I think it's also the Dan Snyder mindset in that, like, we thought coming in this season, people will be falling all over themselves to work here, including the best of the best. And so the top candidate isn't, and so it's hard to separate those two things. Why it's important to get somebody quickly, to Mike's point earlier, is because you're starting to get into the scouting combine season, and you need a head coach in place before you go to Indy for the combine. Now, that's at the end of February. So you have 2 or 3 weeks to really assemble. No, I'd say 2 weeks because you want to assemble a staff to be able to attend those festivities with you. It would have been great to have a coaching staff in place for the Senior Bowl. Not going to happen, but you don't have an infinite amount of time. Put it that way, because you really have to get into draft season at this point in time. All right, let's cycle to the Dan Quinn conversation. And Mike, how do you feel about the Dan Quinn rumor and the fact that I think John Keim and multiple other folks have said that the Commanders have really liked their conversations with Dan Quinn so far?
It's literally only one thing that I don't like about Dan Quinn. It has nothing to do with his previous stint in Atlanta. Well, maybe it does. It has nothing to do with his current position as the Cowboys coordinator. What I absolutely hate about Dan Quinn, he has not won a game against any of his former assistants. Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, Mike McDonald, who else? Whoever's a head coach and they were a former assistant of Dan Quinn in Atlanta, he has not beaten them. That is the reddest of flags for me. Having said that, it's not like I would hate him being here, because I would definitely take him over Rivera for sure. And I do feel like he may have learned his lesson from his previous stop at Atlanta. However, 3 of those coaches are in the NFC East. I mean, I'm sorry, in the NFC Conference. I'm sorry. If we met them in the playoffs with him as head coach, how can any of us be expected to win if he continues to lose to his former assistants? That is a red flag. But other than that, I'm cool with the Bama.
Somebody on Twitter called him Caucasian Rivera. Mike, do you agree with that?
Oh my gosh.
You said me?
Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Woo. It's hard because like a lot of stuff happened in Atlanta, according to Logan Paulson. I've been listening to him talking about Dan Quinn, and a lot of stuff happened in Atlanta that I feel like he may have learned his mistakes since then. I'm like, I don't know. It could be iffy bringing him here. That's all. But I don't think it'll be as bad as Rivera, because unlike Rivera, I'll throw this at y'all. He's had success since his previous head coaching gig. So I feel like that alone proves that because my main problem with Rivera is just that he wasn't modern enough for 2023. I don't think you'll have that problem with Dan Quinn. So that alone makes me a little easy on bringing him in. But again, that red flag with his former assistants, that's hard to ignore. But I don't think he's Rivera 2.0. I'll give him that.
So the person that said it, their is at Lazarchick 78209. Their name is White Mamba. They said, "Oh, good. They can have more fun at practices and go 7-9 the next 4 years with Caucasian Rivera." That was the full quote. Why are people so down on Quinn? Yeah, I know you were getting into this before.
I don't know. Like I mean, I do know it's because he's a retread and there's new shiny toys out there. And people don't like, they don't like a guy who, was slightly above 500 as a head coach in Atlanta, who by a lot of accounts, several reporters have, and I think Logan Paulson was one of the people that talked about it as well, was, when Quinn got let go first of all, that Quinn was beloved by his players. Like he was he's the leadership quality that the team is looking for is there. And one of the things he did when he got let go was he called around to like various sources in the NFL going like, what went wrong here? What did I do wrong? How do I improve this? What can I do? That's a good thing. He wasn't just sitting back complaining that he got screwed. Maybe he was a little bit, but he wasn't openly doing it, but he was actually actively using that failure to try to improve rather than just like taking it back and looking at it himself and going over it in his own mind. He picked the brains of other coaches, other players, front office people. That's what he did. He went around and tried to find that out. I think that's a great thing. Now, I'm not stumping for Quinn. Quinn still isn't my first choice to be the head coach, but I would not be thorough. I wouldn't be out there, storming the gates at the park, if he did, right? Like if that's the hire, because you hired a front office, like you trust the owner, you trust the guy the owner hired, so trust the guy they hire, right? Like that's why we hired them, to bring in the right guy. And if Dan Quinn's the right guy, and if they think he's the right guy, who am I to argue with them? They're the ones sitting in the interview with him. And again, you can't find anybody around the league, from what I've seen, saying anything bad about Dan Quinn. It's all fan complaining. Like, again, I think Mike brought that up last week about like the time Jim Fossil was here. They were going to bring in Jim Fossil, and like everybody revolted. How'd that work out? We ended up with Jim Zorn, right? Do you want, Joe Barry to be our head coach because that's who we have to settle for after we, back out at the last minute? No. So, if Dan Quinn, like, he's not my first choice again, but Dan Quinn to me would not be a disaster that I think a lot of people seem to think it is. Again, the loud minority is probably speaking right now, and the loudest opinions get the most attention. So I don't think it's that big of a deal that he's, people on Twitter don't like him because people on Twitter don't know anything. Present company excluded. You guys are really smart.
One of the ways you can tell like how somebody really did, or where it was that things went wrong, is look at what happened when they left, right? Did the Falcons like turn into this playoff team and this high caliber group once Dan Quinn left? No, they are under 500 since he's been gone. They're 21-30 since he was there. They were a 500 team while he was there. One game over 500, as a matter of fact. So if you put that in perspective of our group, we were a sub 500 team under Rivera. We were a sub 500 team before Rivera got here. I think we won't be a sub 500 team with our next coach because we are going to have an improvement in coach and front office. So I agree, Eric. Dan Quinn would not be at the top of my list. He wouldn't move the needle for me in terms of like a whole bunch of elation and excitement if he got hired. But hey, we have a head coach, and I'd be actually more intrigued by who his coordinators were than the Dan Quinn hire himself, if that were to be the case. We go. So,
Yeah.
Mike, I asked you, where do we go from here? If it's not Ben Johnson, then who is it?
So I tried not to get my hopes up for Mike Macdonald because I felt like either Ben Johnson was going to be the coach or Dan Quinn. I knew we were interviewing them on Monday, but it was like, I'm not going to get too excited. But now that the door is left open, why not? It feels like the way people are talking about him, it feels like he's the defensive version of Sean McVay. And I'm like, look, if y'all saying that in these circles, and we can look at his performances this season, name a good offense, he probably shut him down. So I'm just saying, like, I'm really feeling Mike Macdonald. I think we do need that youth movement. And on top of that, I'll throw something else out at you. He's not too far removed from the college system. Now, back in the days, that would like severely hamper you. But nowadays, I feel like that might enhance him, especially coming from a program like Michigan. He's seen a lot of these players when they were still in high school or when they were still coming out of college. So I feel like a combination of Macdonald and Peters during draft time would be unbelievable, especially with the crop that's coming out right now, including a few Wolverines that I wouldn't mind coming to DC. But that's where I'm leaning. Honestly, I can't even give you another name besides Dan Quinn and Mike Macdonald because Bobby Slowick already signed the extension in Houston pretty much. So he's locked up now near for another year. I was joking earlier, but I don't want to run it back with B-Enemy for real. I feel like maybe in a different time you can think about it, but with the ownership change and the complaints from the players last season, you can't promote EB to his coach, unfortunately. So, yeah, it feels like it's either going to be Dan Quinn or Mike Macdonald, or we might make it to March without a head coach.
What do you think about Eric Anthony Weaver? Do you think he's a legit candidate for us?
I was thinking about him the whole time Mike was talking because, like, that's the guy nobody's talking about. Everybody seems to forget. Everybody's like, Ben Johnson, Mike Macdonald, Aaron Glenn, all these guys. Yeah, nobody's talking about Anthony Weaver. Anthony Weaver is an assistant head coach in Baltimore, and I think that's a big deal because he's got a lot more of those. He's a lot closer to the administrative stuff that a head coach has to handle than some of these other guys might be. Dan Quinn aside, because he's done it before. So that is an interesting name, and I still don't really know a ton about him, except the players love him, and he gets the players like hyped up. He coaches. I think he's the D line coach, in addition to being assistant head coach. So that's an interesting scenario. I don't know how that translates to running a whole team, but I mean, he's coming out of Baltimore, and that's a really well run team. So he's a guy that I don't think you should discount because he checks a lot of boxes, I think. So yeah, that I would it wouldn't nobody would surprise me at this point to get hired of the guys that they've interviewed. Nobody would surprise me as becoming a head coach, but he might be the one that would come the closest to surprising me, I guess.
Yeah,
But I don't think he should.
Can I
I think he's
piggyback off?
yeah.
I'm sorry,
What's that?
I wanted to piggyback off of something he said. It's been rumors or tweets, or maybe he even said it himself, that Josh Harris loves the Ravens organization and how they ran. So if he couldn't get nobody from the front office, maybe he will go after the more experienced head coach and bring some of what he likes in Baltimore to DC. I know a lot of y'all don't like that because you feel like you're biting off of Baltimore or whatever. But at this point, bro, I haven't seen an 11-win season in my life. The Ravens had about 4 of them things in the last 5 seasons. So if they doing something up 295 that we need to start doing, I'm with it. I'm tired of losing. I want to win.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a guy that's been around Harbaugh, who's been nothing but a winner in his time in Baltimore. I don't mind it at all. He's also interviewing for the Dolphins defensive coordinator position. Obviously, if the Commanders were like, hey, we want you to be our head coach, all that would be squashed immediately about that defensive coordinator situation.
First time Miami was ever turned down for DC.
So we'll see. I mean, I think, in my opinion, I think the number one candidate is probably either Quinn or Glenn. I think. I don't. We'll see what they say when they come out of this meeting with Glenn later this week. What is it, tomorrow? I think it is, or today's
Tonight.
Yeah,
So
so
I think
it's
tonight
tomorrow.
was the Glenn interview.
Oh,
Yeah.
tonight. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll know more about that. It just, I think everybody was wanting an offensive head coach. There are no current offensive head coaches still in the running, as far as we know. So we're going to get a defensive coordinator position. That's not a bad thing, guys. That's not a bad thing. Remember what Houston did last year? They went out and got D'Amico Ryans, who led them to the playoffs as a rookie. I mean, a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback. You just have to have the right guy on offense to pair with you if you're a defensive coordinator. I saw a really interesting note that said that, like, one of the things that I think this was from Louis Riddick. He said that one of the things that a lot of these coordinators are missing on their interviews is they don't have succession plans for their coordinators when they get poached by other teams. And teams want to hear who they're going to replace the guy that they're bringing in up front with at that coordinator position. And a lot of guys don't have plans for that. So it will be very, very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So scale of 1 to 10, Mike, how damaging was this Brian Johnson news as a fan today?
Oh, as a fan? A hard 9. And I'm not even just talking about my fanhood or fandom. I'm talking about all the fans. We were really thinking that this was going to happen. Now, of course, John Keim and Adam Schefter, they were reporting that it wasn't a slam dunk, especially Adam Schefter on Sunday night or Monday, whenever, saying that it wasn't a slam dunk. So you kind of felt a little bit uneasy. But, I mean, Peter King came out with a blip or something saying that the coaching circle, well, I think I said this before, but like that's how devastating this is. I look at Peter King as gospel when it comes to NFL news. And the fact that he was even late to the party reporting Ben Johnson, I'm like, well, I guess it's Ben Johnson. So for this to happen, it's definitely a blow. Like, I don't think it's a panic move like we like to take things, but I do feel like it's going to take a while for us to kind of get over and not bringing in Ben Johnson, especially if he continues to have the success in Detroit or elsewhere. And then I'm going to be honest with you, bro. Somebody brought this up. There could be 3 openers in the NFC East next year. it's a strong chance this Bama might end up in the NFC East after all, just not with Washington. And that would be, it would be amazing. But man, will it ignite one of those rivalries like instantly if Ben Johnson brings his butt to the NFC East. Whoever he joins, instant ignition of a rivalry.
Yeah. Which wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, it'd be good to have some more spirited rivalries around here. Eric, I saw some folks comparing Ben Johnson to Josh McDaniels from the Patriots, who was like turned down a couple jobs, or Brian Leftwich, who turned down that Jacksonville job. Do you think Ben Johnson can recover from this in terms of his coaching and get a head coaching gig one day?
I mean, yeah, I do. I don't think it's that disastrous, because if he puts together another solid season next year, people are going to continue to say good things. I don't think this is a great look for him, though, personally, but I don't think it's a Josh McDaniels level. He didn't back out after he accepted the job. He at least had the dignity to not, decline the second interview, albeit extremely late. So I don't think it's a death knell for his career. But the ego, I don't know if that's a factor or not, but that's something to watch. I don't think he's McDaniel's level douche yet, but we'll see we'll see where he gets in a year or two when he starts. If his head gets too big, and maybe next year Detroit's offense isn't so prolific and he comes down to earth a little bit, and maybe he wishes he would have taken some interviews. But we'll just have to wait and see that. I mean, I still think he's by and large, according to a lot of people that know a lot more than I do, he seems to be a guy who is on the trajectory to be a head coach. So we'll just have to see where he lands, but it's not here. So F him. We don't need him. That's what I say. He sucks anyway. That's what happened.
All right. We're going to wrap it up like this. Mike, I want to get your prediction. If you had to say for sure, you had $100 riding on it, who's going to be the guy? But before I do you have any final thoughts on the situation, Mike?
Nah, I just want the fans to relax. I get it. Snyder kind of abused us the last 3 decades or whatever. But speaking from somebody that's a part of a good leadership group, I feel like, especially coming off of bad leadership, you just don't understand how big of a difference it makes when you have people at the head of the table that know what the heck they're doing. So I just want y'all to, give them a year. Just give them a year. Relax a little bit. But as far as predictions, I'm gonna just go with common sense, I guess, at the moment, and say Dan Quinn. He's had 3 interviews with Washington to McDonald's 2, I think. I think they had a virtual and an in-person yesterday. But yeah, that's where the tea leaves blowing. You got John Kime saying that the person he was most impressed with was Dan Quinn. So I'm sorry, the person that his people that he reported, they're saying Dan Quinn has always been favorable. So I'm gonna go with Dan Quinn. I would love a youth movement, but I guess we're just gonna have to roll that dice on Caucasian Rivera and see if we can get more Carolina with Caucasian Rivera than Washington. But yeah, it feels like Dan Quinn or nothing. Well, or March, I guess.
I think if Dan Quinn is hired, it'll be interesting to see if he considers Bieniemy for his OC position. Don't know that he would, but it's a possibility, I suppose. The rumor was he was a package deal with Chip Kelly. That was the rumor last week, so we'll see.
That's another whole episode.
What that's about. Eric, final thoughts before your final prediction?
I just be patient, like Mike said. You trusted if you say you trust the owner, you love the guy he hired as a GM, then trust the guys that he hires as a head coach until they do something wrong. Why just assume that it's a bad hire because it's not the guy you wanted? That's just, and I'm preaching to the choir because I'm as guilty of it as anybody, but I'm tired of the way things were done for so many years. Is just so ingrained into us now that we just assume that, because one guy turned us down, that we don't know what we're doing, and we're hosed for the next 20 years. Just trust the ownership group. They've done a good job in other cities with teams that they own. I'm sure they'll do a good job here. They may not nail this hire. This could be the wrong hire, or could be the guy that coaches the team for the next 15 years. Who knows? But I just be patient, fan base. And I know you won't, but I just have to at least ask. I probably won't either.
And who's your guy? Who do you think? Like $100 on the line. Who you saying is the guy?
$100 on the line. I'm gonna go with the long shot. I'm gonna say Anthony Weaver because he's the one we have heard the least about. And with this ownership group and the lack of information that comes out of it and all the speculation, I think the quiet guy in the back of the room is like secretly the ninja that's going to destroy everybody. And maybe it's Anthony Weaver because he's got zero buzz around him. So why not? I'll put my 100 on the long shot.
Okay.
35K coming back or something. The roulette wheel, 3,500. Yeah.
I want to say Dan Quinn because I think it's the most logical, but then my mind starts doing this gymnastics routine where it's like, well, maybe that makes Seattle desperate, and we know Seattle really likes Dan Quinn. So maybe by the time we wake up in the morning, there's an announcement that Seattle's hired Dan Quinn. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a real possibility because Seattle had two finalists too, Ben Johnson and Dan Quinn. So do the math, right?
I would appreciate that.
My final thoughts of this, like it's a lot, but don't let this situation force you into believing that we're still the same old same, right? We're not. It's a whole different organization in place. And let's let this thing matriculate a little bit. I do happen to think Seattle's going to hire Dan Quinn. And then from there, I think a realistic option is Aaron Glenn. I think he is going to be the next head coach as of right now. I think he brings all the things to the table that they're looking for. He's still relatively young. He's a very we said this last time, like they're bringing in a lot of defensive coordinators and very few offensive coordinators. So there's something they like about that. He's very well respected and liked by his players and peers. And look, they don't have a ton of talent on the Detroit defense aside from some guys they've drafted recently. And he made them play pretty well this year, all things considered. So I'm going to say Aaron Glenn will be our next head coach. But we'll see. The news will develop fast and in a hurry over the next couple of weeks. And when it does, we'll bring you exactly what it means for this franchise, what it means for you as a fan, and what you should expect in the upcoming season. Until then, we bid you good night. Thanks for watching. Make sure you're locked in and subscribed. Hit the notifications button. Tell your friends to tell some friends to check out this podcast. And we will catch you on the other side. We are out of here.